Almost 9 months have elapsed since Russia's recent attack on Ukraine. Through photographic and video evidence, independent analysts have verified the destruction of 184 Russian aircraft, which is a staggering figure. According to the Dutch warfare research group Oryx, Russia has lost 1,450 tanks since the war began, nearly 900 of which have been damaged or destroyed. As far as human cost is concerned, thousands of people have lost their lives on both sides. Russia claimed to have killed roughly 23,000 Ukrainian soldiers in April. Russian troop fatalities are hardly ever made public. However, a senior assistant to the Ukrainian president told BBC News in early June that 100 to 200 Ukrainian soldiers were perishing there every day. Ukrainian forces may well continue to progress in reclaiming lost ground after 3 months of gains. But what about Russia? Are they really winning the battle, or is their self-created aggression tearing their land apart? Stay tuned to investigate. A brief synopsis of the war. Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, intending to oust Volodymyr Zelensky's Western-aligned administration. Russia's invasion of Ukraine represented a significant escalation of the 8-year-old conflict between the two countries and a critical turning point in European security. After 9 months, many defenses and international policy experts have labeled the conflict as a significant strategic error by Russian President Vladimir Putin that has jeopardized his decades-long leadership. Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, issued a brief but combative national address to impose martial law and general mobilization. Zelensky later declined an invitation from the US to leave, saying, "The fight is here. I need ammunition, not a ride." The US shut down its airspace to Russian jet traffic in retaliation for the unfair action. The largest nuclear reactor in Europe, Zaporizhzhia, was soon bombarded by Russian forces, sparking concerns of a Chernobyl-style catastrophe. Viktor Zolotov, the chief of the National Guard and a close ally of Vladimir Putin, admitted on March 14 that the war in Ukraine is not proceeding according to plan. On March 23, NATO calculated that Russia had lost 7,000 to 15,000 troops during the month-long conflict and that there were 40,000 Russians who were either dead, injured, captured, or missing. By the end of March, Russian and Ukrainian negotiators met in person for the first time in more than 3 weeks in Istanbul. Ukraine presented a thorough neutrality plan. As soon as possible, U.S. Vice President Joe Biden demanded that Putin stand trial for allegedly murdering civilians in Bucha before a war crimes tribunal. After firing 2 Neptune missiles against the Russian Black Sea Fleet's flagship Moskva in April, Ukraine managed to sink it. To fully seize control of the Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts, Russian soldiers then began a new massive attack in East Ukraine, more than the $33 billion Biden initially requested. The U.S. Congress authorized a $40 billion aid package for Ukraine, roughly half of which will go toward military equipment and supplies. More troubles await Russia. Some decision-makers have expressed concern that new weapons could further escalate the conflict or perhaps force Russia to use nuclear weapons. Due to these fears, the United States has been reluctant to provide modern conventional weaponry. These arguments have several flaws, though. The Russian army also lacks a strategic reserve of capable maneuver units to expand the conflict into the Baltic states or any other NATO nation, because nearly all of its tactical units have already been committed to the conflict. It is improbable that Ukraine will have capable, combat-ready soldiers due to Russian President Vladimir Putin's announcement on September 21, 2022, to call up around 300,000 military reservists. Russian ammunition supplies, particularly those of precision-guided weapons, are so low that the country is already purchasing drones and artillery shells from Iran and North Korea. As a result of its logistics system's failure to assist in one war, it can't back NATO in another conflict. Second, because Putin is portrayed as acting irrationally, these worries overstate the possibility that he will use nuclear weapons. Putin undoubtedly misjudged the Ukrainian people's reaction to a Russian invasion, the power of his army, and the willingness of the West to impose severe economic penalties and support Ukraine militarily. He hasn't been irrational, though. As some have feared, he has not extended the war to NATO nations. Furthermore, contrary to concerns from others, he has not carried out crippling cyber operations against the United States and other Western nations. Russian nuclear threats. Putin's nuclear threats against the West in retaliation for Western support for Ukraine may make him feel better. Still, They are not believable until Russia's military is prepared to allow Putin to kill his country. The Russian Air Force is out of precise munitions and has not been able to gain air superiority. Nuclear bombs won't make these issues go away. NATO's nuclear shield does not cover Ukraine, and there is a chance, however remote, that Russia could deploy nuclear weapons. How is the war tearing Russia apart? The Russian military has failed to take and control a significant portion of Ukraine after 9 months of fighting. Whatever happens in the battle, a sovereign and independent Ukrainian state will continue to exist on the European map. Additionally, it will be more substantial than the rump state that the Kremlin had in mind when it began the invasion in February. Putin's war choice has been a disaster for Russia and a tragedy for Ukraine. Significant manpower and military casualties have been sustained by the Russian military. The Russian economy has entered a recession due to the economic sanctions imposed by the EU, the US, the UK, and other Western nations. These sanctions also represent a longer-term threat to the country's vital energy industry. Milley estimated 100,000 dead and injured Russian soldiers in November, although that figure may be low. Early in August, a Pentagon officer estimated there had been 70,000 to 80,000 casualties in Russia. That occurred more than 3 months ago, and the Russian army has not benefited from those months. According to reports, poorly equipped and recently deployed Russian soldiers have been wiped out in battle. The Russian military has suffered severe equipment losses. 8,000 pieces of equipment were reportedly destroyed, damaged, abandoned, or taken prisoner, including 1,500 tanks, 700 armored fighting vehicles, and 1,700 infantry fighting vehicles, according to the Oryx website. Due to these losses, Russia was forced to use its stockpile, which included T-64 tanks created almost 50 years earlier. According to reports, it has used tanks from Belarus to make up for its losses. Russia had to buy artillery ammunition from North Korea and attack drones from Iran to supplement its weapons. The Russian military has utilized S-300 anti-aircraft missiles on ground targets as it has depleted its inventories of surface-to-surface and air-to-surface missiles. Economic destruction. The most apparent disaster caused by Putin's invasion of Ukraine is and will be economical. By the 7th week of the war, more than 1,000 foreign corporations had scaled back or stopped down operations in Russia, according to researchers at Yale Business School. More will undoubtedly come. While the closure of Aston Martin or Burberry won't have much of an impact on the majority of Russians, the lack of repair and replacement parts from firms like Apple, Bombardier, Boeing, DuPont, Ericsson, Intel, and Analog Devices will have an impact on consumer spending, labor productivity, and eventually the supply and production chain of Russian industry. Additionally, hundreds of thousands more Russians will be jobless due to their exits. Longer term, few foreign investors will return anytime soon because Putin and the Duma have threatened to seize any residual assets of businesses that have hastily left Russia. It painfully reminds me of what the Russian economy experienced after the Bolsheviks took control in 1917. Given the savagery of the Russian military, the severe sanctions that have been in place against it since February will not be withdrawn soon. Sanctions are a cumbersome and slow-acting weapon for punishing and dissuading a state for its actions. Russia's military prestige is in ruins due to poor leadership, tactics, logistics, and lackluster performance against a smaller and less well-armed foe. That will affect things. Russian armament exporters have seen a 26% decline in market share during the past 10 years. Given that Russia's military failed to dominate early in the war when its mostly modernized forces faced a Ukrainian military equipped primarily with outdated Soviet-era equipment, countries eager to buy weaponry will undoubtedly start to look elsewhere, which began to change only in the summer when stocks of heavy weapons began arriving from the West. Make sure to let us know your thoughts down below. Subscribe to the channel as a sacrifice to the gods of the algorithm. Thanks for watching.